fixed ones. I also agree with Colares that I think it's unlikely we'll see some Colossus drops. But Nate, the wait is finally over. It is time for the first semifinals.
That's right. We're on Nimbus to kick this series off. Our first player in the Northwest, the blue Protoss player representing SK Telecom Team 1. He is Classic.
One hell of a Protoss player, that's for sure, but he's gonna have to bring his A++ game today, because on the right top side of Nimbus we have a crowd favorite, a legend of StarCraft 2. Give it up for MMA!
A legend in his own right for StarCraft 2, one of the longest standing names in the game. Last year, when it comes to Terran players on Team Acer, all the hype was about innovation. He had his phenomenal GSL runs, he played fantastically, got signed to Acer, and MMA seemed to come a little bit, out of the spotlight. He didn't have quite the results that people would expect of a player of him. Then Season 3 WCS, he really turned things up at the end of the year, and then this year, he's been bringing it back, and he still finds himself up against players with better win rates against him throughout the course of the year, but I mean, you make it this far, anything can happen now.
Yeah, and one of the funny things is as well that, of course, MMA, despite perhaps 2013 not being the best year of his career, he did make it to BlizzCon, but the moment that he lost back then against Bomber, he made one of the saddest tweets that he's ever made, and he's just like, man, I'm devastated, I'm so disappointed right now, but I'll be back. Next year, I'll be back. And he kept his word, he qualified again for BlizzCon, and now he's here in the semifinals, doing so much better than he did in 2013. That is also true dedication. At the moment you lose in 2013, you can only think about one thing: 1 year from now on, I'll get another shot.
Yeah, and as we start to see the openings of these players unfold, very, very economic, Rotterdam. We're not having any type of tricky play yet from Classic. It's possible that after this Nexus first, he'll maybe move into some tech, but you do need to be careful, because those Marines can make things really difficult if you cut back on your army production after a fast expand.
No, you need very, very economic openings from both players. I do kind of like these spawning positions for MMA, because if I'm Classic, I'm always a little bit worried about my natural being dropped. It's kind of hard to cover all the areas, because of course the medevacs don't have to fly in from the right side, they can fly in from a different angle as well. So a single cannon, or perhaps even 2 cannons, is not always going to cut it. We saw certain Protoss players warp in 6 cannons to defend a location like this. So that's going to be very interesting. This is just, I think, shaping up to be a fantastic series, and MMA seemed confident. I saw him early this morning, he was just doing his thing, eating his breakfast, and he really seemed like he believed that he was going to be able to do this.
It'll be interesting. As you said, the spawns definitely are nice for the drops. The first probe scout comes in, and you see this, you're like, well, there's nothing really that throws you off. Just seeing the 1 barracks isn't quite enough, but you'd have a couple more Marines if you open barracks first. It's definitely not a Reaper at this point, so you can rule out a fast gas being taken by MMA. However, as you said, those drops, I mean, once MMA gets his 3rd base, it's a very short flight over to the natural of Classic.
Yeah, relatively quick engineering bay there. Perhaps a tiny bit worried about some of those crazy Oracle plays that Classic has shown over the last few weeks, we could even say, and also in different matchups, but in particular in this one too. Of course, it's always nice to have access to those missile turrets, and perhaps MMA is even going to go for a very quick +1. We do see the Stargate going down, and normally I would not be too surprised by it, especially because all the analysts mentioned it as well. Classic loves his Stargate play, and we saw it last week. He loves his Oracles, but after a command center or a Nexus first, it's kind of an odd timing then for your Oracle.
Yeah, you know, there are some pushes that Terran players do where they go for these big, fast Marine shoves, and you delay your tech a little bit. Suddenly, 8, 9 Marines come walking up. And we've seen Terran players throw these away. I mean, the photon overcharge could kill them, but you're still going to be able to pick off some workers here and there. However, something else that was mentioned that I really like, aside from this fast engineering bay opening, it's just sitting on the 2 barracks play, and you're going to use that gas to likely move a little bit faster up to that factory than you normally would. He does actually get the 3rd barracks before he moves on to that, which is a little bit unusual if you wanted to get the fast medevacs out. But with missile turrets already in place, the Oracle really shouldn't be able to accomplish too much.
Quick robotics facility follow-up for Classic as well. Could potentially still go crazy on a little bit of Colossus action later on as well, but I think we're going to see a relatively defensive Classic for now, and there we go. We see him warping in the Forge. Of course, we'll give him access to all those Protoss upgrades that are very important in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, MMA, nothing really crazy is going on in this game just yet. Really, the ball is in Classic's court because of the Stargate opening, and we've seen great use against Polk, keeping track of that army. The Oracle, not only was his micro fantastic to pick off SCVs and delay important tech structures, but he also did a great job of getting the revelations on those forces so that, you know, Polk could never actually leave his base without Classic knowing exactly where he was going.
Classic definitely not the type of Protoss player that will just fly his Oracle in and fly it over a bunch of Marines. He had marvelous control in some of those games that Mr. Turret did complete for MMA. Some players like to just get it 24 out of 25 seconds, and then the moment they see the Oracle, they actually complete it. Otherwise, they might even cancel it, but MMA just completed it, and it's a good investment. Wow, Classic is thinking again about that ridiculously quick third base. I mean, without the Twilight Console, this seems even harder to me to defend.
Yeah, it's very similar in a way to how he had set himself up before, but of course he wasn't going quite for the same tech that we saw against Cole when he made the same plays.
Oh, unfortunately, we're going to have to rehost this game, and we'll try to hop back into the action as quick as possible. Unfortunate moment. It's the calm before the storm, basically. This is like a minute or two before things will go absolutely crazy over here, and that's when the action really kicks in. So I guess if there was ever a moment, Nate, it may as well be now. Nothing has died yet, but as soon as we're good to go, we are good to go. As you guys can see, we're going to continue the action on Nimbus.
That's right, of course, guys. If you missed the start of this game, very economic openings for both players into a Stargate. And Classic's going to try to take, I'd say, an equally fast third base. He does not have a lot of units. He has very little production to defend. So this push out from MMA is quite strong. Now, the Oracle is able to spot it. He can tag in them with Revelation to follow the army, or maybe just try to bring it back to defend.
And honestly, Nate, I already like this for MMA. I have a hard... There is one Colossus on the way, but it's a pretty wide open area there on the low ground of Nimbus. I have a hard time imagining that just like 2 or 3 force fields and a Colossus is going to save the day over here. That's a lot of Marauders. There are a couple of Zealots in the mix as well. It will all come down to execution. MMA boosting over his Medivacs as well. This is going to get tricky, Nate. Good force fields.
Not bad force fields at all. Going to be able to pick off a few of these Marauders. And MMA is still working on the rocks. He wants to expose more surface area to this army so that he can pressure and get that lonely Colossus. But Big Drop's going to move in. 2 Medivacs worth into the natural expansion. Photon overcharge with these Phoenix are going to complicate things and allow him to pick off these forces.
Really interesting battle there with Phoenixes and Oracle and Photon overcharge being casted. The Oracle does get picked off. The Colossus falls as well. That's a pretty big pick-off, but let's not forget MMA is losing a crazy amount of units over here, and he's not killing that Nexus.
Yeah, lose quite a few units. He picked off a good number of probes, though, with that natural expansion in Classic. It's going to hurt him a little bit, but being able to clean up that army is very important. I think it's also very big that MMA now knows about the Phoenix. It's going to be Phoenix Colossus set up at least for this earlier mid-game stage, and that third Nexus is also really going to allow him, if he can hold on to it, to really get a big economic lead.
Yeah, I actually have a hard time summing up how that truly all unfolded and for who it is better right now. Because normally picking off a Colossus or even picking off the Oracle and an expensive unit like the Phoenix, that is really good news if you play Terran. But Classic went up to 3 bases very quickly, and he didn't really lose that Nexus. He did lose a few probes, so I still kind of like MMA's position, but he's going to have to do that one more time, and he's going to have to do it even better than before.
Yeah, we can see him spreading his units out, those Phoenix, picking up the Widow Mines as he tries to just keep himself spread enough that the Colossus' splash damage can't pick off his forces.
But he picked off all the Phoenixes over there, Nate, and that really, really hurts when you want to play a style like this as a Protoss player like Classic.
Yeah, he selects the Marauders and steps them forward to get that vulnerable Colossus.
MMA on fire so far. He's playing very well. That Widow Mine is very complicated as well for Classic to deal with, while we're still watching the first-person view from MMA, so we can just see how quickly these guys really play. Now we're just going to go back to the regular view, and this is just going to go from bad to worse. He's probably going to have to activate another Photon overcharge if he has the energy for it, but losing those Phoenixes, Nate, that's detrimental.
Yeah, picks the Mothership Core off right before it has energy, and probes fighting Marines. Roddy, that is not a fight the Protoss can win.
Nope. You know, last time I checked, I didn't really want to fight Marines with my probes, Nate. That didn't go very well.
No, it's got a fantastic position for MMA. Even with that third base for Classic, he's still losing a lot of the resources he invested into these probes. Being forced to use those to fight really complicates things. And also, as you mentioned earlier, you kill that Phoenix count. Phoenix Colossus is a very expensive army composition, requires a ton of gas, and you can't replace those units very quickly if you lose all of them.
No, and it's also something that snowballs. Like 1 or 2 Phoenixes don't really help out that much. 5, 6 Phoenixes can actually start shutting drops down relatively quickly. MMA has to be careful with it, though. He had had a couple of great pickoffs, but of course he's been losing a lot of workers in the process as well, and he can't just afford to lose Marauders like that. But he's still in a good economic position, Nate. 69 SCVs against the 58 probes of Classic. This is still a position where I would love to be MMA, especially because the Phoenix count, which is normally supposed to help Classic to protect that natural expand, is pretty much non-existent. Like, well, there's one very brave Phoenix, but he ain't gonna save the day.
No, what's interesting to note, just now the gas that third base is being taken. I was curious how heavily he wanted to invest in his Zealots, if we're going to see you know, focus on charge and armor upgrades. But MMA looking to set himself up for a big attack on the left side. And this is kind of what MMA does. He tries to get these multiple drops moving around. This feels a little Pult-esque with just the one big drop so far. But securing this fourth base already shows MMA is thinking about the late game.
Yep, and also because Classic has been losing so many expensive units like Colossus, like Phoenixes, he didn't really have a whole lot of time to focus on upgrades, whether it's like attack armor upgrades or upgrades that make his units better. Now he has a couple of upgrades on the way, while we're a couple of Widow Mines getting close to firing here on the Protoss army.
This really shows the studying MMA did on this matchup. Building Widow Mines and mixing them in with his army will destroy the heavy Zealot count that Classic favored against Pult. And there's still a very large number of Zealots with this army. Widow Mines will absolutely wreck this.
And you can see how paranoid Classic is. He's trying to split up his army properly. He doesn't want to put too much in the natural, but he also don't want to leave the low ground too exposed because he just doesn't have any map vision right now. And that is also because he lost the Oracle, he lost the Phoenixes, and he doesn't really have time to produce a whole lot of observers because he really needed a couple of Colossus to stabilize.
Yeah, MMA is, and what you know, it's not a bad place to be because he's done a good job of slowing him down. When you're playing with styles like this, and you know at this point he's been basically forced out of the Phoenix Colossus, Marauders are going to deal great with the Stalkers and the Colossi. The Widow Mines will help with the Zealots. It's all about keeping that Viking count high enough with this upgrade advantage. And he shouldn't have a problem even killing his Zealots with just his Marines.
Nope, he's producing Vikings 4 at a time. That's very good news for MMA. But like you said, don't take a fight with like 8 or 9 Vikings and then end up in a position where they all get picked off. Blink is ready though, so that's going to help Classic a little bit with the forward Blink here, trying to pick off those Vikings.
Yeah, the Zealots run in, taking up those Widow Mine shots. 2 Colossi still standing. As you said, the Viking count was just not that critical mass, but there might be enough Marauders to pull through since there's not any gateway units left to tank for the Colossi.
And upgrades, Nate. Upgrades. Look at these Marauders going to town, killing all these Stalkers. A lot of Zealots have gone down.
He's going to drop on top of them. Picking off the last 2 Colossi of Classic, and there's nothing left to stop MMA's forces from ravaging this base. GG.